For some, the past handful of weeks has been rough, but today, Chainsaw Man gets it right. There's a handful of very important things here. The artwork, Bucky, Yoru's contract, and why it doesn't work the way that we thought it would, and Yoru's conversation with Asa. A lot of people tend to complain about Fujimoto's artwork because of the discrepancies between it over a handful of months. Clearly, stylistically, the story has changed quite drastically, but I think that works tonally and thematically for the story that we're telling in Chainsaw Man Part 2. Not only is Fujimoto experimenting and growing his style to what he sees fit, but he's also doing it in a way that is rotating around his publishing method. I don't think we'll ever find out what his publishing contract is or what he's actually writing to, but the guess that I made prior is that he's writing in batches, which means he would also draw in batches. Depending on the length of the chapter and how many he's trying to do in a batch, between the breaks that he potentially has, that artwork can be really crisp, really thin, brittle, intricate line work, or it could be the opposite. Rather thick line work, not all too crazy, maybe not much shading, maybe more mistakes, etc, etc. You know how it works. There has been a change, and I think that's perfectly okay. Want to see something cool? I have a Patreon with a free weekly manga podcast talking about all of these amazing stories and a way for you to support me directly if you feel inclined. I greatly appreciate it. But I also have a brand new podcast channel. Link is in the description. Please go and subscribe. The weekly manga podcast will be updated there at the end of every week. Thank you for your continued support. This chapter is a good example of what I think Fujimoto is capable of, at least within his publishing, without perhaps breaking your health bank. There's a style in here that I don't think I've seen for quite a long time. This whole chapter oozes Fujimoto's passion and how he tends to articulate his panel works. Something that Fujimoto is known for heavily is how intricate and purposeful his panel work is. A sense of weight, a sense of motion, a sense of reading capability. Everything usually flows nicely, and sometimes it becomes sloppier depending on how stressed or overworked he may be, and other times he puts a lot of time and effort into it. There's a thought process behind it in this chapter, and I think it works beautifully to emphasize the amount of absurd detail that goes into drawing a character like Denji and Pochita and this hybrid armor that he currently has. It's incredibly difficult. But on top of continuously doing that, he also has to draw a motorbike. I am by no means an art expert, but that bike is incredibly detailed, almost absurdly detailed to what you think Fujimoto would actually try and do. It actually seems oddly out there in comparison to everything else that he's been doing. So much so that I kept going back to reread that page just to make sure my eyes weren't playing tricks on me. It's almost like it's blurred or holographic or something isn't lined up properly, but it does look immaculate. It looks amazing. It's incredibly highly detailed. And if this was his choice to draw this, or maybe his assistant's done it, I don't know, but clearly there's a ton of time and effort in here, and it's different, that's for sure, but it works incredibly well. The same thing can be said for the drifting sequence. Denji's being chased by Yoru on this motorbike, and he throws up a dove. And Yoru swerves out of the way to avoid that dove, which we'll talk about in a moment on why, and she ends up crashing into a wall and bleeding out, basically. That panel of her swerving is gorgeous. It's a really nice single panel. It has a beautiful composition to it. It trails down perfectly with how you would read it. The only thing that I find with a lot of Fujimoto's artwork, especially in his full panels, is that sometimes a lot of the line works mesh together. Can be a little bit difficult to figure out like where things are placed and like how much depth is in there. But because there's so much detail and thin line work on this motorbike, behind and contrasted with the rather thicker line work of Denji, it works really nicely, especially with Yoru on top, who has a similar thick line work to Denji. It just meshes really nicely, and then obviously underneath you have these very brittle, beautiful concrete cracks that are super thin and stylistic and just look really crispy. It's a beautiful panel, and I always think Fujimoto is great at doing these singular full pages. Let's address the elephant in the room though. Why did Yoru take damage? So obviously we know that death is not possible right now. So this fight is quite literally an eternal one until something happens. Yoru also technically can't take damage. What I mean by that is that anytime she does take damage, she will heal from it because of the contract that she has made with the American state and citizens. There is a bit of a funny loophole that Denji figures out, which I think is rather impressive for him. Denji is rather exploratory in this new bodily form that he has, and he's rather switched on. He figures out the loophole of Yoru's American contract. So if someone else does damage to Yoru, she'll heal from it. But if she does damage to herself, she won't actually heal from it. Now while this works brilliantly, and is rather funny to how Yoru operates, I do not believe for a second Denji set it up this way. Him spewing up a dove was for him to try and heal his body. He would not know or understand or even figure out the value that Bucky has to the consideration of a dove. So he would not have known that Yoru would swerve to try and protect this bird because of the flashback that she has of Bucky. This brings us to the most important aspect to this chapter, that is Bucky. This is solely Asa's memories and emotions, and this is where I think you're getting more of them intertwining together. Throughout this entire fight, all of these different interactions, all of these things going on, nothing has really shook Yoru to her core. She's been rather stable in her mindset until certain situations with Asa trying to forcefully take over her body, or Yoru playing tricks and relinquishing it back to Asa. Over the story, we've also found out that Yoru's mind and her emotions are mingling with Asa's mind and her emotions. So they actually feel things differently, but they kind of merge together into this weird middle point. And what you get is a really complicated two-personality, one-body syndrome. Two minds, two emotions, two separate people are sharing the exact same body, but fueling the experience differently. So let's say Yoru is anger and disgust and blah blah blah, that's being fueled into a body, but then Asa is innocent and sad and scared, and that's getting fueled into a body. Both of those things are now getting sent back to each of their minds on whoever is in control of the body. So if Yoru is in control, Asa's memories and emotions will naturally flow into her, but also vice versa. Asa's in control, understanding of killing and death and eternal warfare comes back up as well. It's interesting how much it's jumped forward into its relevancy. Before it was kind of like it's back and forth type of thing, but now it's genuinely burdening for both of them. You just recently seen it with Asa and her trying to comprehend the feelings and all of the guilt that Yoru has now done, and that's directly flowing into her. Now you're seeing the opposite. Yoru seeing a bird that she has no connection to at all, but remembering the amount of guilt and feeling it had to Asa and how it shook her to her core at the beginning of the story. It's actually a really sensitive way to kind of full circle this moment with Bucky and what Bucky means to them as representation. If you didn't realize, Bucky is an incredible analogy for Asa and Yoru, quite literally a headless chicken. And what an headless chicken does is that it kind of operates on its own accord with no real thought. And when Asa was evidently killed right after and her body taken over by Yoru, thus turned into a headless chicken with no real control. But now they have started to merge and that headless chicken motif becomes way more prominent. But at the end of it, someone must take control of the body, and that's what this fight is all about. How can Denji split these two apart without actually killing either of them? And with death out of the picture anyway, Denji has to figure it out. And that is the most difficult thing. How exactly do you split two beings that are kind of intertwining so effortlessly right now, where Asa's core memories and experience are now becoming one with Yoru's where it actively affects her? That's a problem. But it also works in their favor. Yoru right now is out for the count. She's bleeding out, can't heal properly, but she's not dying. Putting her into a comatose state might actually work for Asa if she can fight Yoru internally. And Asa has quite the fight and drive after the conversation she had with Denji. An extra layer to this that I find really sincere is the relationship between Asa and Yoru. It's complicated, but the end of the chapter frames it as kind of like a sisterly thing. Yoru avoided this bird because she knows that Asa hates when birds are killed. To me, that is the sensitive nature of Asa flowing into Yoru and cannibalizing with her core. So now Yoru is becoming more sensitive to the blight of other things when originally she might not have been. Just to give you a funny comparison to that, 10 seconds prior to her swerving from the bird, she runs over someone. It's core experiences that are based through Asa's own experience now flowing into Yoru and affecting her. It's a very powerful thing, it's very beautiful, and I like the sincerity of it. How far do you take that though? I'm not entirely sure. because it is a double-edged sword. If it's affecting Yoru, it will also affect Asa, and both seem like they could crumble at any moment. There's still so much unknown up in the air on how this fight, this outcome, and what Denji decides to do navigates towards the end of the story. I think this chapter was a strong one. I enjoyed it thoroughly, and I would love to hear all of your thoughts on it as well. That's basically it. Thank you for watching. I'll see you all later.